Yeah, the Rebbe. Oh, here. Oh, they want the Rebbe to make a kינוס Torah. Days of Halamed said they need to Yom Tov Israel a little bit Torah. We have the honor today to have the continuation of the kינוס Torah we started yesterday. Rav Shmuel שוחט, ראש ישיבה, ישיבת היכל מנחם, ב'דחול לוק. הרב שוחט, בבקשה.
As usual, we always have a short notice, so can take full responsibility. Okay. This is something that I'm learning, so I'm happy to share it with you. Interesting Indian. This is in the beginning of the halachas of Ribis. The Tur says that you're not allowed to take ribis from another Jew because of, it says in the pasuk, right? Regarding the union of ribis, it says clearly, right after the union of ribis, it says right? That your brother you have to make sure you. Okay, you have to make sure that your brother is taken care of, and by lending him money and taking from him ribis, you're not letting him survive, live properly. I mean, one thing is to lend him money; that's a mitzvah. Make sure to help him. But to take from him also ribis above it, it's it's pressure. It's in a way not letting him live. It's not mitzvah v'chechi chayim. That's what the Tur brings. And he says that by a goy, there's no. It says only v'chechi chayim, right? You have the mitzvah is davke to make sure your brother is taken care of, is alive. But a goy, there's no mitzvah. There's no need to mechaya him, and therefore you could take from him ribis. That's what the Tur brings. So the Bach right away asks over there on the Tur. The Bach asks that the Gemara B'Metzia Ezu Neshek, where it speaks about the dinim of ribis. So he brings. There's a Gemara there that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that it says in the pasuk Al tikach me'itoi neshech v'tarbis. Al tikach me'itoi neshech v'tarbis, which means me'itoi, says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. What does it mean me'itoi? Me'itoi means from him, tafka from a yid, not from a goy, right? And it's also a Mishnah Mefureshes. But the point is that the pasuk says Al tikach me'itoi neshech v'tarbis, which means that tafka you should not take ribis from a yid, and from a goy it's fine. But then over there, that's what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says. And Rashi adds over there that even though it says in the pasuk, right, the pasuk before, it says about Ager and Toishav, and it says about Ager and Toishav that v'chai yimoch, right? That you also have a tzivui to help him survive. Right? So even though it says that regarding Ager Toishav, and we know that Ager Toishav, nevertheless, I mean, the Mishnah says clearly over there that Ager Toishav, you could be malvehim beribis, you could take ribis from him. So why is that? Because of the pasuk that says meitoi, which means even though really, I mean, what's understood from Rashi is that even though really you have an obligation to help survive the Ager and Toishav, I mean, different than a goy, because a goy you have no tzivu at all to mechayim, but Ager Toishav you are mitzvah v'chayimov. Nevertheless, because it says in the pasuk Al tikach meitoi neshech v'tarbis, that you should not take from him, which is Dafka Yisrael. Therefore, you could take even from again Toishov, you could take from him. So the Bach asks, over here, we see clearly opposite than the Tur, because the Tur says that the whole reason why you're not allowed to take ribis from Ayid is because of a chayach chayimah, right? You have to give him, you have to make sure that he's alive. You can't take from him more money than what he has, right? You can't take from him ribis. Mashenkein, a goy and a ger toishov, right? Is you're not mechuyev to give him chayus, and therefore you're allowed to take ribis from. That's what the Tur says. But the Tur is really basing it all on the union of chayus. But we see here from Rashi, that's what the Bach asked. We see from Rashi clearly in this Gemara, doesn't have to do. It's a clear pasuk. It says clearly they're not allowed to take from a yid neshech and tavim from a goy or a get tershav you're allowed to. And even though you have a chiyuv of a chayimoch, even though the get tershav is a chiyuv of a chayimoch, that you have to give him life, right? So the question is, I mean, where do you draw the line here? Meaning by get tershav you say you have a chiyuv of a chayimoch and you still take ribis from him. And here the Tur says that you're allowed to take ribis from a goy because you have no chiyuv, and it says v'chayachich goyimo. So what's going on over here? That's the question of the Bach. So the Taz brings this shaila, and he gives an answer. What's the answer? The answer is there's two kinds of chayus, right? There's because in the same two psukim regarding again Toishev it says v'chayimoch. And then it says in the pasuk al tikach meita neshech v'tarbis, and then v'chayachich. Okay, so we see here clearly that we have here two. That's what the Taz learned, that there's two chayus that you're mechuyev on. There's the v'chayimoch of the ger and toishav that you're mechuyev to take care of it. But then when it says about ribis al tikach meita neshech v'tarbis, which is specifically a yid that you're not allowed to take ribis from him, but a ger toishav you're allowed to, and a goy you're allowed to take ribis from him. Oh, that's because it says right after v'chei. So that's how he answers the stira to a certain extent that was asked on the Tur from this Gemara, right? That there is a chiyuv to mechaye a ger toishav take. That's something else. That's a whole different thing. It has nothing to do with ribis. Ribis, the Torah says specifically, which means that it's specifically an inyan, which has to do with chayus, meaning not to take away the chayus of a yid by a goy, and a ger toishav is different. That's how he answered. Now, but the question over here is still that Be'emes, the Tur, the Tur source, what's the Tur source, Bechlal in the singing? That the reason why you're not allowed to take ribis from another yid is because of a yeah, it's written in the Pasuk. But is that could also be as a hemshech to the Pasuk, meaning not that's a reason not to be able to take ribis. Especially that the Gemara doesn't mention that. The Gemara doesn't mention that the whole union of ribis is because of the chayach chayimah. And we see clearly that the limud in the Gemara is from al tikach meitoy nesh, which means that the reason is why not? It's like a gzeres hakos, right? That al tikach meitoy, the dafka from a yid, you know how to take ribis, but not from a goy and a ger toishav. But that's a mashmos in the Gemara, and we'll also see, for example, when the Rambam brings the halacha about it, the Rambam brings another pasuk. The Rambam brings the pasuk from Kisei, which says lanochri sashich lo enchicha sashich, right? That only that a goy you should take ribis from him, and from a yid you should not take ribis. But again, we don't see, even though it's stuck written in the pasuk, but even now, for example, Pshuto Shemikra, it could be it looks like in Pshuto Shemikra The v'chechicha is more of a continuation to the halacha, not like a sibur. It doesn't seem like it's a reason for the union of ribis, because we see many places in Torah that it speaks about quite a few psukim about ribis, and it doesn't mention this thing in every place. So it doesn't seem that this is the reason for not to take ribis, the union of a chechicha. So the question still stays in a way: where does why the Torah has to? Even though it's written in Pasuk, but why the Torah has to say it as a reason for not to take ribis from a yid? Mashenkin a goy and a gertoishav, you're allowed. So the Rambam, we could say, and also we have to understand why the Rambam chooses a different pasuk here than the Gemara regarding the din of ribis. Right? The Gemara brings the pasuk. It's in Behar, which says Al tikach meita neshech v'tarbis mashenkin. He brings the pasuk of lachicha lanochri sashik lachicha lo sashik. Right? So that you can answer pasuk because the Rambam right away mentions in that halacha, the Rambam says that a go you're mitzuve to take from him ribis. Yeah, you're mitzuve to be malvim beribis. Where we know this from lanochri sashich, right? So even though there's many that argue, I'm not going to get into it, and there's many that argue on the Rambam on this, and I don't think it's even brought. I don't think that la halacha. I looked a little bit in Shulchan Aruch. I didn't see that he doesn't. He paskins like the Rambam. Doesn't seem like he paskins like the Rambam. So even though the Rambam says that there's a mitzvah to take ribis from a goy, and he learns it from lanochri sashich. Clearly, he learns it. Other people learn it as more of a say and a lois aseh, but only regarding a yid. But there's no mitzvah to take ribis from a goy. Anyway, so from this, the Rambam actually brings this inyan of the goy of being mechuyev or a mitzvah to take ribis from it, to be malvehim and take ribis from the goy. We could say that's why he brings this pasuk dafki, because this pasuk brings this two nekudas, right? This pasuk brings lanochri sashich olachicha lo sashich. It brings both sides. Side of the goy, it's a mitzvah to take from ribis. The side of the by a yid, you shouldn't take ribis. So you could say that's what the Rambam. But again, by the Tur, we have to understand why he brings this inyan of v'chechicha imach. Why is this so important? So if you see a little bit later in the next sif, he brings a halacha there regarding a mumor. So a mumor. So there's a discussion in the poskim there. What's the gather of a mumor? But b'chlal he writes that a mumor, someone who's meaning in the highest level, someone who's lehachis, like he's koifer, like it's brought over there, is koifer ba'ikir, and he's he rebels against the Eibishter, he does it lehachis. So a mumor, you're allowed to be malvehim beribis. You're allowed to take ribis from him. Why? Because you're not mitzuv lachayoyse. And then they bring the priest over there brings that even though he is considered a chicha, right? Even though he's considered your brother, right? Afa pishachot Yisrael, who he brings it down from the Gemara. So even though he's considered a chicha, is your brother. So be'emes mitzad, for example, al tikach meitoy neshech v'sarbis, right? It should be the mumor should also be included in this because it's meitoy. But because he's Yinametzu Belachayoisoi, right? Because Yinametzu Belachayoisoi, the mumor, therefore you're allowed to take it from him. That's what the Tur is mamshich. And he brings his mockeries from the Rishon. I don't think it's a Gemara. I think it's mainly it's a limud of the Rishonim, this union of the moon. So could be, we could say that the reason why the tour has to bring dafka the union of the even though Be'emes, the Gemara says clearly that the mocker, I mean the nekuda sa'inyan, that you could take ribis from a goy, but not from a yid, it's from atikach meitoy. That's what it's learned from in the Gemara. Nevertheless, the tour chose to dafke mention the singing of a because of what he mentions a little bit later about a mumma. That even though he's take itoy, so you should think that you're not allowed to take ribis from him. Nevertheless, because it's depending also, like it says in the pasuk on and like the Taz is medayik, that the chechich is an addition to the isur of al tikach meitoy. Therefore, because this is an important inyan, this is the reason for not to take ribis from a yid and take ribis from a guy, different by a mumad also, which is you're not mitzvah l'chayoisei, so you could take ribis from him. So that's in a way you could say the mashmos in this whole thing. And Taka the Nesekelim over there of the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, they go through the different details about a mumor and the different levels in the mumor and the gather, if it's when are you not mitzvah l'chayoisei. And they also ask about the lifnei v'osita mishal. They're going through the whole inyan. But it's very interesting because specifically regarding malve, meaning take ribis from the goy, from the mumor, you're allowed to. But for example, to let him lend to you and you give him ribis, that's already not allowed to. Because he's taking from you ribis. So he's making your lifnei v'osita mishal that he is taking from you ribis. But when it's the other way, when it's negea to the union of l'chayoisei, so because you're not mitzvah l'chayoisei, you can also take from him ribis. It's very interesting, this nekuda. So it could be this is the reason why the tour is very much medayik to get into the union of mitzvah l'chayoisei. Now, okay, shkoyach. So it's interesting. There's no mock in the actual Shulchan Aruch for this. It's only from the Mekoides here. Yeah, Rabbi Bell showed me here that the Alter Rebbe clearly says, like the Rambam, mitzvah min ha-Torah likach ribis min ha-nochri, v'osel al voisa b'chinom, shenemar, ha-nochri sashich. Kloimar, soshuch ze mitzvah zasei likach mimenu neshech, v'lo al voisa b'chinom. Okay? Where? Oh, here, Koshenema, ein hey. Leisechonim, leisitalim, matnas chino. Pay. Oh, here I see. Shakaroim achshav kilkilu ma'asem b'yoyser v'im kenochim gemurim mutal al voisem b'ribis. If Shem Kilu came from Kolatera Vasala Hayoisam, okay, like it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. Visuribi is told by Misha Mitzuvin La Hayoisam. Shalem al Tikumen International Tarbi Chayich Chayim. Okay, very good, yeah. Oh, so it's interesting here. We see here both extremes, right? Because the Rambam, I don't think the Rambam brings this inyan Bichlal. The Rambam doesn't bring the inyan of Mumor or La Hayoisai. The Rambam doesn't mention it at all. And the Shulchan Aruch doesn't mention, the Shulchan Aruch Yosef doesn't mention the union of mitzvah min ha-Torah likach ribis min ha-nochri. He also doesn't mention. I see here it doesn't quote it before. It's the Bach, Shalom, that's it. It's not brought down even in Shulchan Aruch. Okay, very interesting. Okay, shkoyach. Okay, so Alter Rebbe here takes both sides. From one side the Rambam, that it's a mitzvah minatoy likach ribis min anochim. From another side, he brings you the whole union of the tour about that everything is tolling in lachayois. Okay. Okay, so just to finish off, it's an Indian in the previous Anyonim. So there's the famous sikh of the Rebbe about this Indian, about the mitzvah. The Rebbe goes into the whole hasbara. Why is it a mitzvah to take from the goy ribis? And even like the Alter Rebbe, his lashon here is even stronger. That osur, you're even not allowed to give halva without taking from him ribis. So we have this. So the Rebbe goes through the whole thing, and the Rebbe's question over there is, why is it that? One thing is to take from him ribis, but why you mitzuvah? Why you have an obligation to take from? So the Rebbe goes into the whole discussion, and he says, the nekuda saying is that bichlal, this that ribis comes to you is because it belongs to you. It's because it belongs to you. It's something which has to do with your sheresh haneshama, your avodas habirurim. It's something which is neged to you, and therefore you have to get it. So by a guy, you have an obligation to actually get that money, get that ribis from the guy. That's so it's actually interesting. Meaning, if we tell lechacham yech kamoy to figure out what's the difference between a goy that you mitzuvah to a ger toishov and a mumor that you're allowed to take from him ribis, but you're not mitzuvah to take from him ribis. The Rebbe actually mentions the union of ger toishov in the sikha, but there's no mitzvah. Mitzvah sheni you could, so that means there's some kind of a different avoido in the birurim in that way. Anyways, but what I wanted to point out, something interesting that the gedang that comes out is that when you're saying that the ribis is told in the union of chayus, right? You could say that not only you cannot be mechaye, you cannot you're not mitzuvah lahachiyos. Because the whole union has to do with this birurim, that the ribis is a birurim that you have to take. It's also negeh to the lahachiyos. Because you are not allowed to be mechaye. You're not allowed, but you have no chiyuv to mechaye, to give chayus to the goy or the ger toishav or the mumor. But on the other hand, you have an inyan to dafka be mevarer those inyanim that have to be mevurer. She's by a yid, you're not allowed. You're mitzuvah lahachiyos, but you're not allowed to take the ribis from him because the way you're dealing with those birurim is by tchiyah. By not dealing with them. But when you're speaking about a goy, it could be by ger toishav and by a mumor, you're adrabe. You're not mitzuvah lachayois to give him chayos, but adrabe. You have to make sure to get to be mevar the birurim, through getting his ribis. Interesting. I'm sure. Somehow it could tie in together. All right, so we should be zoichet to see avodas habirurim already happened. So the bias Moshiach Tzidkeinu, the code of Mamash. Good morning.
Kínus will continue tomorrow at the same time, the same station. Good morning.